Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're continuing with the next part of this epic time chamber series. My name is Ash. Please, for me, drop a like, join the Patreon, and subscribe to the page. Also, leave your comments down below. With that, let's begin.
Cross my heart and hope to die. Welcome to my dark side.
The scene shifted from Universe 6 back to the palace of the Omni King. But this wasn't the familiar grand entrance of the palace, with its shining floors and towering pillars leading to the Omni King's throne. No, this was a different place, an underground prison hidden beneath the palace, deep in the shadows. It was a grim, cold place, far removed from the splendor above. The walls were damp, carved from dark, unyielding stone, and the air was thick, almost suffocating. It was in this place, shackled by the chains of the multiverse, that Goku was held captive. Goku sat there, slumped against the wall, his wrists and ankles bound by glowing, ethereal chains that pulsed with a sinister energy. They were unlike any chains he had ever encountered, forged not just from metal, but from raw, cosmic power. Even though he was trapped, his eyes were wide open, forced to witness a nightmare that replayed endlessly before him. In front of him hovered a crystal ball, shimmering with an eerie light, showing a vision he could not escape. Earth, his home, exploding over and over again. Every time he blinked, the image would repeat, taunting him with the destruction of everything he loved. This was his punishment, a cruel torment designed by the Grand Priest himself. Pain coursed through Goku's body, but it was nothing compared to the agony of watching that scene. Each explosion, each eruption of fire and light shattered his heart anew. To him, everyone he cared about was gone. His family, Goten and Chi-Chi, his beloved granddaughter Pan, all obliterated. Even his closest allies, Vegeta and Broly, who had been on Earth when it happened, were caught in the blast. The vision showed no mercy. It spared no one. Goku's spirit, once unbreakable, was now hanging by a thread. He had nothing left, nothing to protect, nothing left to fight for. But beneath the despair, something else burned. A fierce, unrelenting rage. The anger inside him grew with each passing moment, and his thirst for revenge was the only thing that kept him from sinking into complete darkness. His hands clenched, his knuckles turning white, and his body trembled as he tried to contain the storm brewing within him. Goku's eyes, filled with tears of rage, glistened as he watched the vision play out once more. Then, unable to hold it in any longer, he screamed, his voice echoing through the prison corridors, reverberating off the cold, unfeeling walls. It was a cry of fury and anguish, a roar that shook the palace to its core. The power within him began to rise, surging through his veins like a wild, untamed beast. His ki erupted, bursting forth in a wave of divine energy that blazed with a blinding, golden light. The air crackled around him, and the ground beneath his feet trembled as if the entire universe could feel his wrath. The divine aura around him was overwhelming, radiating pure, unfiltered power. For a moment, it seemed as though nothing could contain him. The walls of the prison, built from the strongest materials in the multiverse, began to crack. A small fracture spread across one of the divine walls, a testament to the sheer force Goku was unleashing. But just as quickly as it had risen, his power was crushed. The chains binding him glowed brighter, their grip tightening around his limbs, forcing him back down. They pulsed with a dark, absorbing energy, draining the ki out of his body like a leech. Goku collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath as the chains continued to tighten. These were not just ordinary restraints, they were chains used to uphold the very fabric of the multiverse. To break them would require a power far beyond anything that had ever been seen. A power that transcended even the gods. Yet, despite the chains, despite the pain, Goku refused to be silent. His body shook, his muscles bulging against the restraints as he screamed, his voice raw and unhinged. "I will kill you," he shouted, his words echoing with a savage intensity. "You hear me, priest? Mark my words, I will gut you like a fish." His voice was hoarse, but the venom in his tone was unmistakable. His hands gripped the chains, his muscles straining as he tried in vain to pull them apart. Veins bulged on his arms, his eyes wild with fury. "I did nothing to you gods, but still you tried to kill me," he snarled, his voice laced with rage and disbelief. "Are you that threatened by me? No, I know what this is. You're scared. Scared that a mortal like me could surpass you. So this is how you keep me in line, huh? He laughed, but there was no humor in it, only a cold, bitter edge. Well, congratulations, priest. If I didn't want to kill you before, I do now. He spat, his voice dripping with hatred. I will get vengeance. I will get my revenge. Do you hear me, priest? The crystal ball flickered, showing the Earth's destruction once more, as if mocking him. But Goku didn't flinch. Instead, his eyes burned brighter, his spirit defiant even in the face of his torment. Every word he spoke was a promise, and every breath he took was fueled by his unyielding will to break free. He might have been shackled, his power drained, but his resolve was unbroken. The heavy iron door to the dark chamber creaked open, its echo cutting through the silence like a knife. A soft, almost taunting chuckle drifted through the shadows, followed by the steady, confident steps of the Grand Priest. He entered the room with an air of calm authority, his robe flowing gracefully behind him. A faint smile played on his lips, as if he was savoring a private joke, and his eyes gleamed with a cold, almost mocking amusement as they locked onto Goku. "Do you really think I fear you?" the Grand Priest asked, his voice smooth, unhurried, almost dismissive. He paused, letting the question hang in the air, savoring the tension in the room. "Don't make me laugh. I'm simply following orders. This is what Grand Zeno wants, and I am merely assisting him in carrying out his plans." His smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was something cruel, almost sadistic, about the way he looked at Goku, like a cat toying with a trapped mouse. "If it were up to me, you Saiyans would have been wiped out long ago. You turned my son against me. You corrupted him." Goku's eyes narrowed, confusion flickering across his face as he tried to process the Grand Priest's words. He knew that Whis was gone, that he had sacrificed himself, but what the Grand Priest was saying didn't make sense. What did he mean by Whis being a figment of his power? Goku struggled to find meaning in the priest's cryptic accusations, but his anger was too intense, too consuming to let him think clearly. The Grand Priest stepped closer, his expression darkening, and the mocking edge in his voice sharpened. "You forced me to do something I never wanted. I had to erase him, my own son. Even though he was using my power, he had his own consciousness. And because of you, Saiyan, I was forced to remove it, to erase my most talented creation." Goku's fists tightened, his knuckles cracking under the pressure. The chains around his wrists glowed, tightening even more, as if reacting to his rising fury. He still couldn't fully understand what the Grand Priest was saying, but none of it mattered. All he knew was that the man in front of him was responsible for Whis' death, and that he was standing there, smug and confident, gloating over his victory. Goku's head snapped up, his eyes blazing with rage. "What are you talking about?" he snarled, his voice low and dangerous. "Whis sacrificed himself. He wasn't some puppet of yours. He made his own choice." The words spilled out, raw and heated, but there was a hint of desperation beneath them. Goku's mind raced, trying to make sense of it all, but the Grand Priest's smirk only grew. "Ah, but you see, that's where you're wrong," the Grand Priest said, his tone condescending. "Whis was my creation, an extension of my will, given form and consciousness, but he was never meant to defy me, to betray his purpose, and yet, because of you, he did. I had no choice but to remove him, to erase what should never have existed in the first place." Goku's heart pounded, and his vision blurred with rage. None of it made sense, and he didn't care. The only thing he could think about was tearing the Grand Priest apart, ending the man who had taken so much from him. He strained against the chains, muscles bulging, veins throbbing. As he tried to push himself to his feet, the chains glowed brighter, their grip tightening. But he didn't care. He had to fight. He had to make the Grand Priest pay. "If you're so confident," Goku growled, his voice shaking with barely contained fury. "If you're so sure I'm no threat to you, then take these chains off and let's settle this, right here, right now." His eyes bore into the Grand Priest, filled with a hatred so intense it felt like it could burn through steel. "Come on, let's see how brave you are without your little tricks." The Grand Priest raised an eyebrow, almost as if amused by Goku's defiance. "Oh, Goku, you truly are a fascinating creature," he said softly, tilting his head as if studying an interesting insect. "Always so eager to fight, to struggle, even when you have no hope of winning. But tell me, why would I give you that satisfaction?" He stepped closer, his eyes gleaming with a cold, calculated malice. "These chains aren't just for show. They're designed to contain beings far more powerful than you. You could burn your soul to ashes trying to break free, and it would make no difference. Goku glared at him, his chest heaving. Each breath labored as he fought against the suffocating pressure of the chains. "You're scared," he spat, his voice trembling with anger. "You're scared of what I can do. That's why you're hiding behind these chains. If you weren't afraid, you'd face me." The Grand Priest's smile faded, replaced by a look of mild irritation. "Scared? No, Goku. I'm simply practical." He took a step back, his robe rustling softly. "You see, your power, while impressive, is nothing compared to mine. You're just a sane who has lost his way, clinging to a hope that doesn't exist. But let me make one thing very clear." The Grand Priest's eyes narrowed slightly, his patience clearly wearing thin. "You're nothing but an ant to me, Goku," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I have far more important matters to attend to, like dealing with those primordial demon gods, who have also managed to escape their prison." Goku's lips curled into a smirk, even as his chest heaved with barely controlled fury. "So you are scared," he taunted, his voice cutting through the heavy air like a blade. He knew what he was doing, poking at the Grand Priest's pride, trying to force his hand. Right now, he needed those chains off. Everything else could wait. Rage burned in his eyes, but beneath it was a calculated desperation. He had never felt such raw, unrelenting anger before, but he had nothing left to lose. Everyone he knew, his friends, his family, even the Dragon Balls, were gone, and with them, any hope of bringing them back. He was alone in a multiverse ruled by a deity who wanted him broken. There was no turning back. If this was going to be his final fight, then he was determined to make it one the multiverse would remember. He just needed one chance, a single moment where the chains weren't holding him down. The Grand Priest's smile faded, replaced by a look of mild interest. "Very well," he said, almost lazily, as if this were a minor inconvenience. "I'll entertain you for 5 minutes. Show me what you've got, Goku. Give me everything, so I can crush your soul using only 1% of my power." He raised a hand, and a flicker of energy danced around his fingers. "You couldn't touch me before, and now that I've regained 95% of my strength, combined with the new powers my children have granted me, your chances of defeating me have dropped to negative 100%. Goku's heart skipped a beat as he watched the Grand Priest's hand move. For a moment, there was a tense silence, and then, with a snap, the chains binding Goku's wrists and ankles began to glow. Slowly, they unraveled, dissolving into wisps of light before vanishing altogether. The moment the chains fell away, a rush of energy hit Goku like a tidal wave, flooding his body with power that had been held back for what felt like an eternity. His ki roared to life, a wild, untamed force that crackled around him, sparking with brilliant divine energy. He could feel it in every fiber of his being. The strength, the speed, the raw, unfiltered power coursing through him once more. It was as if he had been suffocating, and now, finally, he could breathe again. Goku clenched his fist, feeling the energy surge through his muscles, and a grin spread across his face. "Now this is what I'm talking about," he muttered, his voice low and full of exhilaration. The divine aura around him blazed, flickering between golden and crimson hues, as if reflecting the intensity of his emotions. The ground beneath his feet trembled, unable to withstand the sheer force radiating from his body. Without wasting another second, Goku launched himself upward, moving faster than a bolt of lightning. He shot through the ceiling of the prison, shattering the stone and metal as if they were nothing but paper. The palace above barely had time to react as Goku tore through layer after layer, blasting straight up towards the surface. He moved with such speed, such raw power, that the structure, forged from the strongest natural resources in the multiverse, crumbled under his might like brittle glass. The walls of the palace trembled as Goku burst through, his ki leaving a trail of golden light in his wake. He didn't even pause to catch his breath. His body was fueled by adrenaline and rage, and the only thing he could think about was the fight ahead. He had flown through the toughest material in Zeno's palace as if it was nothing but butter, and it felt incredible. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he was free. He broke through to the surface, soaring high above the palace, the cold air rushing past him, carrying away the dust and debris that clung to his skin. The sky was vast and open, stretching out endlessly, but Goku's eyes were fixed on the ground below, where he knew the Grand Priest would be waiting. His aura flared even brighter, swirling around him in a chaotic, mesmerizing dance of light and energy. It was a spectacle that could be seen across the heavens, a signal to anyone watching that Goku was back, and he was ready to fight. Hovering in mid-air, Goku clenched his fists, the aura around him pulsating with sheer, unrestrained power. "All right, Grand Priest," he said, his voice echoing through the sky. "You wanted me to show you everything I've got. Then get ready, because I'm not holding back." In an instant, Goku's ki erupted like a blazing sun that shot waves of energy across the multiverse. The very air trembled under the force of his power, rippling out like an unstoppable tidal wave. For a moment, Xeno's realm itself seemed to shudder, a cosmic quake that rolled through the space-time fabric before calming. But Goku was only getting started. His ki continued to rise, his energy spiking higher and higher with every second as his transformation progressed. In a brilliant flash, Goku ascended to his perfected Ultra Instinct form, his silver hair glowing under the pale light, his eyes fierce and focused. His aura flared with an intense, pure energy, shimmering like liquid silver and crackling with streaks of lightning that flashed across the night sky. Even the stars seemed to dim in the face of his overwhelming radiance. But Goku didn't stop there. With a fierce cry, he activated his Kaioken technique, pushing it to a staggering 50 times multiplier, magnifying the power of his Ultra Instinct form 50-fold. His aura blazed even brighter, stretching outward from Xeno's realm, sending shockwaves rippling through the universe itself. The heavens shook, and the ground below him cracked and fractured under the sheer weight of his unleashed energy. The Grand Priest observed with a calm, almost bored expression, but there was a flicker of intrigue in his eyes. "Impressive," he said, his voice laced with the faintest hint of mockery. But his gaze narrowed slightly, as if he saw through Goku's every move. "Don't waste my time, Sane," he said dismissively. "I know you're holding back. Surely you know that your only chance lies in the Omni form. Otherwise, this fight will be over in seconds." Goku grit his teeth, frustration flashing across his face. "I can't," he replied, his voice laced with bitterness. "Ever since Xeno drained my ki, I haven't been able to access that power. At first, I thought it was just the chains holding me back. But even after being released, it's like I'm cut off from it." He muttered the last part to himself, his mind racing. "If I can't use it, what about Vegeta? If he's in the same situation, then we're in serious trouble." The Grand Priest raised an eyebrow, his expression somewhere between amusement and disappointment. "Oh, well then, is there even a reason for you to continue this charade? Not that your Omni form would pose any real threat to me. Of course, I'm simply saying that it's the only chance you have, no matter how small that chance is." His lips curled into a smug smile. "So then, go ahead and do your best." A smirk crept across Goku's face as he leveled a fierce glare at the Grand Priest. "We'll see about that," he said, his voice steady, unyielding. "I thought you deities would have learned by now. Never underestimate a Sane." In an instant, he vanished from sight, moving faster than a beam of light, faster than thought itself. He closed the distance between them in a fraction of a nanosecond, his fist drawn back, muscles bulging as he poured every ounce of his strength into the punch. He swung with all his might, a blow so powerful it created a shockwave that shot outward, rippling across the multiverse. Planets nearby were jostled in their orbits, briefly knocked off their axes by the force of Goku's strike before they slowly realigned. But the Grand Priest didn't flinch. He caught Goku's punch effortlessly, with one hand, his expression calm and unfazed. His other hand was tucked casually behind his back, as if to mock Goku's effort. He gave Goku a faint smile, his grip as steady and unmovable as steel. The blow should have been enough to topple mountains, to shake the foundations of the cosmos themselves. Yet, to the Grand Priest, it was nothing more than a passing breeze. Goku's energy crackled around them, but the Grand Priest didn't waver, didn't even acknowledge the sheer power behind the punch. Goku pulled back, his teeth clenched in frustration, but his spirit remained unbroken. He could feel the raw power coursing through him, amplified by every close brush with death he'd endured, every hard-fought battle that had pushed him to the edge. His Ultra Instinct, Kaioken, every form he had achieved, all of them were stronger than they'd ever been before. Yet somehow, standing here with the Grand Priest effortlessly holding him in place, Goku realized that even this newfound strength barely scratched the surface of what he was up against. For this wasn't just any opponent. The Grand Priest was the embodiment of power, a being so far above mortal strength that even Goku's most powerful forms felt like raindrops against a hurricane. The Grand Priest's grip tightened around Goku's fist, and before Goku could even register what was happening, he was launched across space with a force that felt like the universe itself had punched him. The speed was beyond comprehension, faster than instant transmission, faster than light. He was hurled like a comet, blurring through the fabric of space. Goku's body tore through 5 planets in a row, each one shattering on impact and exploding in a burst of rock and fire behind him. Each collision sent tremors rippling through the cosmos, until finally, Goku was flung straight into the heart of a blazing sun. This was no ordinary sun. It was massive, a colossal star that burned with a fierce, searing heat. The inferno engulfed him instantly, its flames licking hungrily around his body. But in the heart of that star, a sound began to echo, rumbling louder and louder, a yell that cut through the silence of space itself. It wasn't a scream of pain. No, it was something deeper, a roar of pure, unbridled anger. Kaioken, times 100, Goku's voice bellowed, reverberating through the burning core of the sun. His ki exploded outward, a radiant burst of energy that snuffed out the flames around him, extinguishing the sun in a single, blinding flash. The star's light vanished, leaving behind nothing but darkness, and Goku stood there, his aura blazing like a second sun, his strength surging to new, impossible levels. A faint smile crept across the Grand Priest's face as he watched from afar, clearly intrigued by the unexpected display of power. So he thought, this Saiyan is still full of surprises. In the next instant, the Grand Priest was gone, vanishing from his spot in a blur and appearing before Goku in a flash of light. His fist was already drawn back, aimed for a devastating blow straight to Goku's core. But Goku's reflexes kicked in, and he caught the Grand Priest's fist with both hands, his muscles straining to absorb the impact. The sheer force of it sent Goku skidding backward through the void of space, though he managed to hold his ground. He's still stronger than me, Goku realized, gritting his teeth as his arms shook from the Grand Priest's overpowering strength. But he pushed the thought aside. He couldn't afford any hesitation now. To regain his momentum, Goku gripped the very air itself, a feat that defied mortal understanding, and pushed himself forward. He darted back into the fray with blinding speed, performing a rapid slide step, his afterimage technique creating 6 clones that surrounded the Grand Priest from all angles. Each clone charged in simultaneously, fists ready, their movements perfectly coordinated to overwhelm their target. The Grand Priest laughed, a low, mocking sound. With a flick of his wrist, he summoned a shimmering sphere of energy that burst outward, consuming each clone in a bright flash. But before the light had even faded, Goku was already above him, hands cupped as he channeled his energy. Kamehameha, he roared, firing a massive beam of pure power down toward the Grand Priest. The Grand Priest barely glanced up. Predictable, he muttered, catching the blast in his palm as if it were nothing more than a ball tossed by a child. With a twist of his wrist, he redirected the energy back at Goku. Goku quickly braced himself, catching his own Kamehameha blast mid-air, his muscles tensing under the force of it. With a swift movement, he slapped the blast downward, where it streaked away into the depths of space before exploding in a dazzling display that lit up an entire galaxy. The shockwave rippled across light years, shaking stars and scattering stardust in its wake. The two fighters hovered in space, locked in a cosmic dance of strength and willpower. The scale of their battle was beyond anything the universe had seen. But despite Goku's fierce attacks, it was clear who held the upper hand. The Grand Priest was calm, collected, his face barely showing a hint of strain. He hadn't even tapped into the power he had recently regained from the angels. He was holding back, barely using a fraction of his true strength. At this moment, he was fighting with only about 7% of his full power. But Goku had no idea. Breathing heavily, Goku hovered in place, his chest rising and falling as the reality of the situation began to set in. His arms ached, his mind raced, and for the first time, he felt a creeping doubt begin to settle in his thoughts. He's really strong, he muttered, his voice strained. What? Have we awakened? He clenched his fist, frustration and worry mingling as he remembered the plan he and his allies had once shared. This was supposed to be a team effort, he thought. Together, maybe we could have stood a chance. But now, I'm all alone. He exhaled, his gaze hardening as he looked back at the Grand Priest, who hovered there, completely unbothered, as if the entire battle was a minor inconvenience. What can I do by myself? Goku wondered, his heart pounding as the weight of his own limitations pressed down on him. Is it even worth fighting at this point? In the depths of the other world, past the shimmering lights of King Yema's towering palace, and beyond the serene fields where King Kai tended his planet, lay a region most beings feared, Hell. Unlike the bright realms where souls found rest, this was a realm for the most feared and the fallen, a dark, endless stretch where those who had wreaked havoc in life were stripped of their bodies and left to wander as wisps, mere shadows of themselves. It was here, in this shadowed abyss, that Gohan found himself. When he had died, Gohan had expected a kind of peace, maybe even a gentle reward. After all, he'd spent his life protecting Earth, fighting off enemies that could destroy whole worlds, and standing by his father, Goku, to defend the multiverse from threats that could wipe out existence itself. But the Kais in the other world had taken a different view. To them, Gohan was no hero. He was a rebel, a Saiyan who had dared to rise against the gods. In their judgment, his battles against beings of immense power had been an unforgivable defiance. And so, instead of peace, Gohan was sentenced to the harsh shadows of hell, his heroic deeds overlooked, his sacrifice ignored. Now, stripped of his physical form, he floated through the twisted landscape, drifting through a churning, restless void. Without a body, he felt his very soul stretched thin, as though it were being tested, worn down, torn apart by the swirling dark energies around him. His only anchor in this endless night were his memories, images of his family, friends, and every battle he'd fought, replayed in his mind like lifelines, keeping him from slipping into despair. Yet, even here, he refused to give in. He clung to a fierce resolve to find a way back to his body, back to life. He would fight, even if he had to claw his way out of the depths of hell itself. Then, one day, while his mind wandered in the chaotic energies of hell, a presence flickered nearby, a familiar, comforting energy he hadn't sensed in what felt like an eternity. He recognized it immediately. King Kai, suddenly, as if answering his unspoken thought, Gohan felt his essence solidify. The shadows around him seemed to recede, and before he could fully comprehend it, he was standing on solid ground again, his own 2 feet planted firmly beneath him. He glanced down in astonishment. His body was back, arms, legs, everything, right down to the feel of his Sion energy humming beneath his skin. And standing there in front of him was King Kai, a broad grin stretching across his face, though there was an edge of worry in his eyes. "Gohan," King Kai called, his voice warm yet hushed. "Glad to see you're still, well, in one piece, sort of." Gohan blinked, still dazed, then looked back at King Kai with surprise. "King Kai, what happened? How am I back in my body?" King Kai glanced around nervously, adjusting his sunglasses as if wary of unseen ears listening in. Let's just say I pulled a few strings," he said, his voice low. "But listen, this isn't permanent, Gohan. They don't actually want you to have your body back." Gohan's face tightened with a mix of anger and confusion. "But why? After everything I've done to protect Earth, to save the multiverse, doesn't that mean anything to them?" King Kai sighed deeply, his expression turning weary. "It should," he agreed, nodding slowly. "But the deities running things here, well, they see it differently. They hold you responsible for standing up against the gods. To them, all your deeds don't make up for the fact that you were part of what they view as a rebellion." He looked up, his eyes brightening with a glimmer of determination. "But I have a plan." Gohan's eyes narrowed, his voice sharp with a mixture of curiosity and doubt. "A plan?" "Yes," King Kai nodded, a spark of excitement lighting up his face. "A tournament, a battle royale right here in Otherworld. If you can win, there's a chance the deities might let you keep your body." He rubbed his hands together, clearly energized by the idea. "Think about it. If you defeat the strongest fighters from every corner of the other world, prove yourself against the best. They can't ignore a victory like that, not with everyone watching." Gohan felt the familiar heat of determination ignite in his chest. This was the path back, a way to finally prove his worth and regain his place. "All right, what do I need to do?" King Kai straightened, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "You'll be going in as my fighter, like your father did before you. But there's a catch." His mouth twisted into a scowl. "You're restricted. Only your Super Saiyan form is allowed. The higher-ups say it's because you're too dangerous at full strength." He made air quotes with his fingers, frustration clear on his face. "They know the power you hold, Gohan. but I know that even with this restriction, you're more than capable." Gohan's fists clenched, and his face set an unshakable resolve. "All right, King Kai, I'll do it, whatever it takes." The months of preparation felt like an eternity, but finally, the day of the tournament arrived. The otherworld arena was packed with energy, the air thick with both excitement and tension. Thousands of powerful spirits, gods, and deities from every realm and corner of the afterlife filled the vast grandstands, each one eager to witness the spectacle unfolding on the golden sands below. In the center of it all stood Gohan, clad in a striking black and purple gi that stood out boldly against the arena's shimmering sands. He could feel the eyes of the higher deities on him, each gaze heavy with judgment, suspicion, and for some, barely concealed hostility. From the stands, one familiar figure watched Gohan with particular intensity: Pikkon, the warrior who had once fought Goku in a similar tournament. His sharp eyes narrowed as he studied Gohan's stance, his aura, the calm but fierce look in his eyes. The resemblance to another fighter he had faced in the past couldn't be ignored. "That man, he looks like Goku," Pikkon mused, his mind racing with questions. And that energy, could they be related? But before he could dwell on it any further, the atmosphere shifted as a dark, malicious energy surged through the arena. From across the field, several familiar and sinister presences began to materialize, each one more menacing than the last. The deities had summoned opponents for Gohan, and these weren't just any fighters. His old enemies, now revived as contestants in this deadly game, appeared before him one by one. The first was Kid Buu, his small, chaotic form brimming with that wild, uncontrollable energy. His eyes glinted with mad delight, a twisted smile stretching across his face as he spotted Gohan. Gohan," he muttered, a crazed grin spreading across his face as he bounced on his feet, his pink aura flickering like an unstable flame. "Wonder if you'll scream the same way this time." His voice oozed malice, each word a taunt, laced with venomous excitement. Then another figure stepped forward, a tall, imposing figure with a cold smile and gleaming green skin. Cell crossed his arms, a look of smug confidence plastered on his face. He glanced over Gohan with casual contempt, a mocking grin tugging at his lips. "So," Cell sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "it seems someone finally managed to kill you, Gohan." His eyes glinted with amusement. How disappointing, after all that potential. Gohan's gaze flickered between them, his face a mask of steely resolve. Kid Buu cackled wildly, bouncing on his feet with manic glee. "Let's see if you still scream the same, Gohan," he taunted, his eyes glinting with a fierce hunger, his words thick with malice. Gohan stood firm, his expression calm, meeting their taunts with a look of sheer determination. "I'm not here to play games," he replied evenly. "If you're my opponents, then I'll just have to take you both down." From the sidelines, King Kai's voice rang out over the roar of the crowd, though barely audible. "Remember, Gohan, Super Saiyan only. No transformations beyond that." Gohan glanced back and gave King Kai a single nod, a look of reassurance flashing in his eyes. His heartbeat slowed, his mind sharpened. He'd fought and defeated these foes before. He'd do it again, even with his power restricted. As he powered up to Super Saiyan, a brilliant golden aura flared around him, enveloping him in a fiery glow. His hair flashed into a shimmering blonde, his muscles surging with energy, as his power radiated across the arena, making even the deities murmur with interest. The arena fell silent as the referee, a broad, red-skinned ogre with a voice that boomed like thunder, raised his hand. "Fighters, begin!" In a blur of motion, Kid Buu launched himself at Gohan, his limbs stretching and twisting in unnatural angles, his fists swinging with deadly speed as he aimed for Gohan's face. Gohan's reflexes kicked in instantly. He sidestepped, fluid and calm, letting Buu's wild punches slice through the air beside him. In a single, well-aimed counter, Gohan slammed his fist into Buu's side, sending him flying backward with a powerful shockwave. Buu spun through the air before crashing hard into the ground, a cloud of dust and debris exploding around him. But before Gohan could even lower his fist, Cell surged forward, a gleaming smirk plastered on his face. His energy flared as he went in for a brutal kick aimed straight at Gohan's ribs. Gohan ducked smoothly, sweeping Cell's legs in one swift motion and catching him off guard. With a hard slam, He brought his elbow down onto Cell's back, sending him staggering forward with a shocked grunt. "How?" Cell snarled, struggling to regain his balance, his face twisted in frustration. He clutched his side, glaring daggers at Gohan. "You're still just as annoying as ever." Gohan allowed himself a small smirk. "And you're still as predictable as ever, Cell." From the grandstands, the crowd watched with mixed reactions. A few of the gods scoffed, unimpressed, while others looked on with faint intrigue. To most, Gohan was nothing but a condemned warrior, a Saiyan who had gone too far and was now getting a second chance he didn't deserve. But King Kai watched him with a knowing smile, completely unfazed. His faith in Gohan hadn't wavered for a second. Pikan, too, was watching closely, his gaze steady and unblinking. Every move Gohan made, every step, every strike. Pikan studied it all, his sharp mind noting the skill and focus behind each motion. This wasn't just any fighter. This Saiyan is different, he thought. He's got something special, something I've only seen in one other warrior. Before long, both Kid Buu and Cell were charging at Gohan again, their energies blazing as they closed in from opposite sides. But this time, Gohan's eyes narrowed, and he saw every move coming, clear as day. Years of battling foes, even more powerful than these two, had honed his instincts to razor-sharp precision. He could practically predict their attacks before they even made them. He'd achieved a level of calm and control that only came from countless battles, even facing off against gods of destruction. In truth, Gohan knew that even in his base form, he was leagues beyond the likes of Cell and Kid Buu. Just going Super Saiyan was, for him, a mere formality, a stretch, a show of respect for King Kai's trust and faith. But he knew better than to reveal his full strength. The deities knew he was powerful. After all, he'd faced down gods of destruction. But just how powerful, that they did not know. And to secure their approval, to gain their permission to keep his body, he had to keep it that way. So for now, he'd hold back, concealing the true depths of his power as he fought. In an instant, Gohan's hands shot out, intercepting the fists of both Kid Buu and Cell with effortless precision. His grip tightened, halting their attacks as if they were nothing more than playful jabs. The crowd watched, transfixed, as Gohan brought both his opponents' heads together in a brutal clash. The crack of impact echoed throughout the arena as the two former villains' heads collided, and before they could even register what had happened, Gohan hurled them downwards. They crashed into the center of the ring with such force that the ground split beneath them, a massive crater opening up in the middle of the arena. Dust billowed from the impact, and a hush fell over the crowd as they realized what had just occurred. The battlefield itself had been shattered, divided by the sheer power of Gohan's attack. To the crowd's shock, Kid Buu and Cell lay motionless at the bottom of the crater. The two notorious fighters, once terrors of Earth and Otherworld alike, had been rendered unconscious by a single strike, each from the warrior they had tormented in life. The announcer stood frozen, his eyes wide, as he glanced between the unconscious forms of Buu and Cell and the calm figure of Gohan standing at the edge of the crater. He struggled for words, his voice wavering. There you have it, folks. This fight has concluded rather quickly. He glanced around, still stunned. The winner of this tournament is the newcomer, Son Gohan. There was a stunned silence, the crowd too astounded to even cheer. How could one person possess so much strength? The very idea was unheard of. Though no one voiced it aloud, that thought rippled through the minds of every onlooker, each deity and spirit silently questioning how a single fighter could display such overwhelming power. Even King Kai, watching with pride, was taken aback by the ease of Gohan's victory. He'd known Gohan would prevail, but to defeat both Buu and Cell in mere moments in his base Super Saiyan form was far beyond his expectations. Goku, even at Super Saiyan 3, hadn't been able to finish Kid Buu, yet Gohan had done it here without breaking a sweat. In King Kai's mind, it was clear. Gohan hadn't even needed his transformation to win. Gohan's original plan had backfired. He'd held back, trying to keep his true strength under wraps to avoid drawing attention. But his sheer force had already outpaced his intentions. By crushing two of the most powerful beings in the other world, he had set himself apart in a way no one could ignore. King Kai snapped out of his amazement and rushed down to the ring, a wide grin spreading across his face. "Gohan, you did it!" he called. his voice filled with pride. The crowd began to murmur, their astonishment giving way to an impressed buzz. A few minutes passed, and King Kai turned to the stands where the higher deities and Kais sat. He cleared his throat, his voice steady as he addressed them, making sure his words rang out across the arena. "Today, Son Gohan has proven himself," he declared, his tone full of purpose. "A warrior of honor and strength, worthy to keep his body in other world, just as we agreed." He glanced toward the Grand Kai, then the other Kais. "Let this be known to all. A promise is a promise." King Kai's plan was brilliantly executed. By making the deal public, he'd ensured that the Kais would be bound by their word, their own reputations now hanging on the commitment they'd made to Gohan. In Otherworld, reputation was everything, and going back on a public deal would be unheard of. A decision was swiftly reached, granting Gohan the right to keep his body. King Kai's gamble had paid off. Days passed, and soon, Gohan had settled into life in Otherworld. He spent his time training at King Kai's home, though not the small, familiar planet where his father had trained. This time, he was at King Kai's other home, a secluded retreat deep in Otherworld, far from the usual distractions. As a Kai, King Kai could travel freely between the realms, and here, Gohan found an ideal place to refine his skills in peace. 1 month drifted by in a blur of focused training. And that's it for today's episode, guys. If you watched to the end, then that could be an indication that you enjoy the series. So please leave a like on the video. Thank you and take care.